All right, hi, C Note here. Today on the show, we're going to talk a little bit about using politics or really taking advantage of current trends in your marketing message and really trying to navigate your personal opinions in messaging from what you're doing when it comes to business on Facebook, because a lot of us are doing business on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. We have strong opinions about things, and I don't think many of us are very concerned with wanting to withhold any kind of important opinions about stuff. We certainly want to be real human beings while we're also doing business, right? So certainly it's important to think about what aspects of these things are qualifiers, and how does our messaging affect the people that we connect with. It's certainly important to consider a couple things. First thing, mostly being this aspect of like just not being antagonistic or ignorant when it comes to any perspective, whether you're on one extreme side or the other, or even if you're just a little bit on one side or the other. Having a qualifying message or having a tone is not an excuse to be ignorant about someone else's perspective, right? We're not here in the business of belittling. I've already talked about this in another episode. Kindness is good for business. Taking care of each other and making sure that we're doing good business for one another. And that includes being tolerant. That means not avoiding bad feelings, but also setting certain boundaries in terms of someone trying to spread any semblance of hatred or a difficult perspective when it comes to what it is that you're trying to say. So what I'm really trying to say here is that you can absolutely have a perspective when it comes to current social issues, when it comes to like anything involving a political mindset. But at the end of the day, you have to realize you're trying to do business, and you're trying to not necessarily use your politics as a means to be ignorant. You still have to think about what it is that you're trying to say to someone, right? You're not necessarily trying to use your perspective as something that is just going to alienate people, because it is possible for you to qualify so much that you're not going to get business. And I don't think, unless you're someone that is trying specifically to appeal to a message that specifically fits a Democrat or a Republican, like, just because you don't quote unquote like the caricature of Republicans doesn't mean you should be putting Republicans in the exclusion box of your ad marketing details, right? And just because the same thing with the opposite. If you don't agree with someone's perspective, you can't just put that whole entire group of people. You're alienating a large portion of your audience. So it is something to be weary of and something to think about when you're sharing your political perspective on the internet. And I'm not saying, again, that you can't share your thoughts and opinions and sharing the moral things that matter to you, or sharing how this affects you as a person, or sharing your personal story. I'm not saying you shouldn't do any of that at all. I'm saying that you should at least be as thoughtful as you can be and take an extra step to think about how this message appeals to who you are as a person, and consider that, yes, you are a person that is doing business, and your reaction to something is just as important as the message that you are portraying, right? So if you are consistently being outraged, if all that you're talking about on Twitter is retweeting political things and you're not talking about your business, then that could be very alienating. For example, I had a podcast that I really, really enjoyed. It was a video game podcast, but for some reason on every single episode, they were talking about social issues, and they were talking about essentially things that they were consistently outraged by, and things that I agree with. But the fact is that they were so preoccupied by by the social issues going on in life, by all of the politics, by everything that was going on, that they were not getting to the meat of the topic. And if they wanted to do that, then perhaps they should have created a politics podcast. But having that as I just, maybe I wasn't their ICA. I understand that. But I also think that I'm not unique in that scenario. I think if you're trying to sell something, if you're trying to promote a product, Like ultimately the focus is that product, right? And if you are confusing the message, if you are consistently every single day, every other post talking about the political issues, the things that are currently going on in society, and having that supersede your message of trying to sell something, of trying to connect with people, of trying to market your brand, then it kind of gets in the way of the message, especially if you are someone who is a coach and you are someone who is consistently bothered by social issues. It might not be the best example of being able to look beyond those social issues to be able to continue to do business. Because ultimately, the fact that we have a certain type of government or a certain president or a certain anything that's going on in society does not have any immediate effect or bearing on you as a business owner. Certainly important issues that you can talk about and have an opinion on and share discussions about. And these are things that we absolutely need to be talking about as people. But certainly also being aware that they do not affect how we can do business. The United States, it's not going to crumble tomorrow. And like my ability to wake up today is indicative to how I'm feeling. It's not about whether or not somebody else tells me to get up, whether or not someone else tells me to get up and go do business, or who to talk to, or how to conduct any kind of business. And usually I conduct business with people without knowing all of their little details about their politics. And certainly if it gets to a point where you start to learn about that person's politics and actually have a conversation with them, you can typically learn that people are not as hateful as the caricature that you've painted in your head about the other side, right? So create potentials to keep your mind open. I just did a recent podcast episode on dopamine about creating barriers versus boundaries. And boundaries are essentially setting up a personal sense of armor, having something that feels really good to protect yourself when someone is trying to take advantage of your services, or someone that is trying to take advantage of your time, or impeding you from doing any semblance of self-care, taking advantage of you as a human being, not allowing you to take off of work or taking any time for yourself. Those are the personal boundaries that you need to set. But setting barriers is restricting any kind of entry into your life at all, anywhere near you, based on your assumptions of people's character. That is also not a good way to do business. Again, refer to the kindness is good for business mantra, essentially. So being careful about what you're putting out there and how you're putting it out there to the world. So this is a really short episode. I just wanted to put it out there because there's a lot going on lately. There are certainly some issues when it comes to a lot of the social things going on. And there are people who care about winning more than morality, and some people who care about morality than winning, quote unquote winning. So it's about finding that balance that works for you and looking past these barriers, looking past these political lines, and looking for the people that you can actually connect with. Because there are plenty of people who have an extreme perspective that I am still okay with in my life because they're not presenting it to me in a forthright manner. I should say that there are certain extremes that I don't allow, but at the end of the day, it's about making sure that you're still kind of open to people coming to you. And then once you learn things, you can set those boundaries, right? So you're not basically blocking off people who could be a qualifier before it even gets to a point where you can effectively qualify them. Does that make sense? So you're not preemptively or prematurely qualifying people who could actually fit with your ICA, but you might be preemptively qualifying them in a way that is based on loose assumptions or loose associations to a caricature that you've created in your head based on, the outrage you're experiencing. In either direction, this is not exclusive to one party or another when it comes to the political spectrum. But it's certainly important to be thoughtful about your message, to certainly think before you post, especially because it will change the trajectory and the perception of your brand if you're willing and open to speaking about your brand on social media. But I know there are a lot of people who are very much averse to that, to either opposing perspectives or people who are consistently talking about this stuff. it is sometimes an issue, and it is, again, different from someone having a political affiliation versus someone who is consistently distracted by it. I know that I would not want to work with a coach who sees politics as a barrier for them to do any kind of business. That's just, I wouldn't want to work with someone like that. I feel like that is not how personal development works. We're trying to get past these barriers. We're trying to get through these lines, and we're trying to see past these things. We're trying to help each other grow and develop and get a nice balance between winning and the semblance of morality. But also understanding that that we just have to grow together, and continuously antagonizing each other and not being kind to one another is just, again, not good for business. So I'm going to wrap that up here. I hope you guys will take care of yourselves. You can go to cnote.media to check out my courses and check out my link for consulting and all of that stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments below. And that's it. So I'll catch you next time on CNote's Media Madness, where we'll talk about making sense of the madness of media and all the everyday life things. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.